Welcome to the Investor Agent Podcast. I'm Steve Seymour, your host, where we help transform the human mindset from scarcity and lack to abundance and wealth, one conversation at a time. Steve Seymour here with the Investors Agents Podcast. We have Steve Plourde on today. Steve, thanks for being on.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Steve recently joined our brokerage, and I was, very grateful for you to consider working with us. So thank you for coming on to the brokerage as well. And I really wanted to kind of just give a little background of what's your business background, and then why did you choose to work with us? And then we'll dive into some other topics. But
sure. How long do you have? How far back do you want to go?
Well, why don't you give us a little bit about before you got into real estate, what was your background, and then what transitioned into real estate? And I know you've tried a lot of different, you've gone down a lot of different pathways with real estate, and definitely want to touch on the major points.
Sure. So I started with a degree from Temple University in exercise science, of all things. Graduated in the mid 90s and, tried to do the thing that is, work with your degree. So I went and worked with a large pharmaceutical company for about 10 years as a financial analyst, doing clinical trials in oncology. We handled, I wasn't a scientist, put that out there, but we negotiated with sites to have clinical trials at those sites. We negotiated the budgets and things like that. And I was there for about 10 years, had a great salary, wonderful benefits, a pension when they still had those, and things were great. But I found that I was, by Tuesday afternoon, done what would have been a week's work, and just sitting there twiddling my thumbs in my cube saying, this is terrible, right? My brain is turning to mush is what I say to a lot of people. So I figured I gotta get out of this. So I was doing, back in those days, listening to Carlton Sheets. I've heard that name come up a couple times on this podcast. But back in the day we were listening to the CDs, and I was like, this is
buy real estate, no money down.
Exactly. Or place tiny little ads in whatever it is. So it was always fascinating to me. My father had a couple rentals in Coatesville. That's where I grew up. And so that always was interesting to me. So I have a career that I'm not really into, but I've got this side thing kind of pulling me. And I was looking for projects. So I got into...
Projects being like real estate renovations or what?
Yes. So I got into a couple flips in Westchester Borough, and did those first myself. Then I got a partner, and kind of took off from there.
Well, tell us that progression, because I know you've been involved in a lot of different real estate transactions, and
sure,
both residential and commercial.
From there, I, back in the day was looking on Craigslist, and there was an opening for a project management role in a commercial, very boutique commercial firm in the Navy Yard, called the McDevitt Company. And so I got that position and started as a project manager. The McDevitt Company is a leasing firm primarily in the specialty retail space. So we did tenant rep for a bunch of brands, primarily the Urban Outfitter brands, and their sister companies based down in the Navy Yard. From there, I kind of graduated to a broker and started as a tenant rep broker down in the Southeast. Did a couple deals there, and the founder of the firm is like, you can do this, you're going to be great. But keep in mind, I was coming from the corporate world, big salary, all the security you could imagine to
Wild West.
Right. What do you mean I'm going to be 100% commission? I've never done this before.
Yeah.
But made the jump. Thank goodness my wife was supportive. Made the jump and never looked back. From the Southeast, I then moved up into the New England region. From the New England region, moved into Manhattan. And having never been from Manhattan, or to Manhattan rather, a kid from Coatesville, my boss is like, yeah, just go up there, walk around, you'll figure it out. And so I did. And, 10-ish years later, we were leasing some of the biggest deals in the city at the time on some of the highest retail streets in the world. Rock Center, Fifth Avenue, Broadway.
It's pretty cool. He said, go do it. And you said, so I did.
So I
like that.
And I look back and think, wow, that's crazy, but learned a lot, learned a ton. And then fast forward from there, as the sort of the open to buy dried up at the time, you can only put so many of that size store in a certain geographic region. Went off and did some even more entrepreneurial things from there. So those things would include single family home new construction with a partner who I did my very first flip with. We've done some small scatter site multifamily funds and syndication in and around Delaware County. And then my most recent role was investment sales on the net lease side.
Pretty diverse background in real estate.
It is. And I was thinking about that, trying to prepare for today, thinking, I look back on LinkedIn and notice a lot of guys who I was doing leases with in the early 2000s, and they've grown their careers, obviously in New York and elsewhere. They're, vice chairman now and senior vice presidents and doing very well in some of the bigger firms. I took a very different approach, a much more entrepreneurial approach, and tried to kind of round out a commercial career.
Yeah. Well, we are very blessed to have that diversification of knowledge added to the brokerage. And, I think what really brought us together was the common vision of creating wealth in real estate.
100%.
As you look at it and you see all the different, there's so many aspects of real estate and you can go so many different directions. And that's the beauty of it, because not everyone likes the same pathway. But real estate offers that, just diversity and, looking at all the options of what's out there, and which, where you can only focus your energy on one space at one time. It's good to see what you don't want.
Yes.
And that helps you figure out what you do want. And I think you and I both have the same philosophy of buy and hold long-term real estate, for wealth creation, right? Yep. Like there's a lot of get rich quick, and you can make a ton of money on land development. You can make a ton of money in basically any area of real estate if you really look at it, if you're the top tier. But the tried and true proven strategy has been slow and steady, buy and hold. Obviously there's ways to accelerate that. What would you say for anyone listening, or just for yourself? Like, what has that discovery process kind of led you to in terms of seeing all that's out there? And then where do you feel like what's that at least the best avenue for you? I know we can't speak for everyone because they all have different pathways they should take.
Sure.
But in terms of where you see, you can't put all your eggs in one basket, but if you were to have to put all your eggs into a basket or a few baskets, what direction would that be with real estate investing?
So it's interesting you mentioned buy and hold, because I've done a lot of projects that were fix and flips early on. We did some student housing development up at Temple University. It's kind of what got us started. And we've done, as I said, the smaller multifamily. To me, I always have had this draw to buy and hold for myself, and I've sort of dipped my toe in that in a lot of different places. We've sold out of other of those things I mentioned for various reasons, market-driven reasons, and so forth. To me, I always had this kind of draw to do it for myself. And I think that's what makes VRA special. The investor part of the agent comes first, and that's what I was drawn to here. There are so many ways, I think, to make money and to generate wealth. And I think it's a very individualized thing. It's about what are your long-term goals. It's about how hands-on do you want to be with any particular investment. I just worked in the net lease space, and folks there are trying to buy what they call mailbox money. You buy a drugstore with a 20-year lease and you don't think about it again because your rent comes in every month. It's credit tenants for the most part.
Yeah.
One mistake a lot of people make, though, is that on a 20-year lease, you get to, years 12 and 15 and 17, and all of a sudden the value of your property has gone down, not up. And that's certainly an important thing to keep in mind in the net lease space. So each little niche, as they say, has pros and cons, and it really depends on your goals.
So it's not a one size fits all. This is the best investment strategy. It's more about how much time do you have? How involved do you want to be? Are you looking for cash flow? Are you looking for appreciation?
Absolutely.
Are you looking for, that steady paycheck? Or are you looking for long-term legacy wealth, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So with that, how do people figure out what's the best pathway for them? What do you think's the best way for them to go about figuring that out? If they're like, I want to invest in real estate, but I just don't know where to start. I don't know how to come up with my goals. I don't even know what I want, but I know I want to invest in real estate. It sounds good.
It does sound good. And these days there's so many people on social media, and just try this, try wholesaling, try land development, try short-term rentals. I think the answer is go out there and network and talk to people who are actually doing it for real, not just on Instagram, and try it. I didn't know a lot about anything and still don't. I knew nothing about student rentals when I bought a piece of dirt in North Philadelphia next to Temple University. But we did it and we took a step forward. So one thing at a time.
Yep. And you went from not knowing anything about student rentals to not just buying it, but developing it.
Ground up
student rentals. So that's the thing is, you got to get your feet wet. You got to try different avenues. And then have someone in your corner that that's one thing that, we've established is we want to take that consultative approach where we're not going to just, you say, I want to do this. We're going to probably ask you why.
Very important question.
Why?
Yes.
Why do you want to buy this?
Yep.
Initially, at least to get the formulation of what is your thought process, and then how can we add value to that? We might be able to bring something to the table you haven't even been thinking of or considering. There's a lot of different agents out there that are genuinely just trying to make the commission and on that one deal. And
Very
something
much so.
that we talked about was we really want to establish long-term strategic partners.
Yes.
Like I look at a possible commercial real estate investor client as a possible strategic partner.
Mm-hmm.
How could we create wealth together? Right. That's
Absolutely.
not just go out, find a deal. That's that one piece of the equation. No, obviously we're not tax advisors. We're not financial advisors, but it's important to look at those things. It's important to figure out how can we incorporate those strategies into the purchase. Is there a tax benefit here? Is there a bigger play with using leverage and scaling up much faster, or do you want to be more conservative? What's your time horizon? Which are you in wealth generation, or are you in wealth preservation?
That's a great point. I think back to an example in my first role in real estate. The story goes, the founder of the company started with a very young brand on store number 3. And fast forward over decades, there are now hundreds of those stores all around the world. And, you start with one deal, as you said, it's not, is it just about a commission? No, it's about a lifelong relationship, and where can this relationship take not just me as a broker, but us as an investor or a business owner. Where can it take our partnership? And so I've got a client right now, for example, that is a franchisee with a national company that's heavily based out in the West Coast. They're trying to bring that concept east. And it's a lot of time. For example, we've looked at over 100 sites, no joke, over 100 sites for what is a 600 square foot requirement. But I know,
and someone might say, why would you waste your time?
Why would you waste your time? Right. So to me, a lot of people would say I'm not wasting that time. But to me, I think it's about the relationship, because that 300 store franchise is going to grow to 600 and 900. And this particular franchisee is going to go from one store to hopefully 3 to 6 to 10. And in that process, we're going to learn a whole lot of things that I don't know, they don't know, about development, about other concepts, other franchises that are out there. And so I take the long-term approach to something like that.
I think that's the best way to be. And, it's kind of one of those things where you do good for other people, comes back, right? And
sure.
And they're going to see that you've invested that much time and energy on maybe that is a smaller deal, but I know you have a lot of experience working on bigger deals, smaller deals. And like you said, it just builds and it goes into, it always builds into something new.
For sure.
What do you think, for anyone out there that's locally, if they were like, because I don't want to speak too vaguely, right? So if someone is specifically looking for something in the commercial real estate space, let's say in the Philadelphia region or, the tri-state region, what would you say your niche is and that you're most well-versed in?
I would say retail and multifamily, because that's where the majority of my experience comes from. Dabbled a little bit in industrial. I have a client right now that's looking for industrial space. And I think that's an important note, right? Like we talked about it earlier. All of these things are very specific. The requirements of a multifamily buyer are very different than the requirements of a retail tenant who's looking for a drive-through, are very different from a retail tenant who can go in line in a small strip center, are very different than somebody who's manufacturing products in a warehouse. So I think there's a lot of guys and gals who are very broad in their expertise. There are others who are very, very specific. For me, I've always been drawn to a little bit more of a diverse background. So,
you obviously have experience in multiple different areas. I just wanted to know, for anyone listening, where's the niche that you can help bring value the most to them, and then what areas do you cover that you're really comfortable with?
It's a good question. So my career has been, at least on the tenant and landlord rep side, has been very regional, if not national, right? So started in the Southeast, was up in New England, then New York. I've lived and grew up in the Southeastern PA area. So I would say for sure I'm obviously comfortable with that perspective, but I've also worked in investment sales across the country. So I guess long story short, for sure, it's the Southeastern PA, South Jersey, Delaware region, which I know is our focus, at least initially here at VRA. But I also have a more nationwide perspective.
It's pretty cool to have that that experience.
Sure.
Well, I think there's a lot of different avenues to go in real estate, and one of the reasons that we wanted to get into the commercial space as a brokerage was you can do a lot of great deals in the residential side, and it's very transaction based, as well as the commercial side, but the big difference is the dollar amount. It's like you're getting to add a 0 or maybe 2 or maybe 3. And, at some level, residential real estate is great. And I think it's such a great way for people to get started. And I think it's just the next step in graduating in this journey to creating wealth. So we're, again, really happy to have you here. I genuinely mean it. Like, I'm grateful for my own benefit, so you can help us, but I also want it to be a win-win with you and, create wealth together. So if anyone out there is looking for support around, if you've been looking at transitioning from single family to multifamily, if you've been looking at, maybe you have some multifamily and you want to go more towards, something that's a little more passive and 1031, they're perfect opportunities for something that Steve has a lot of experience with, as well as anyone looking for retail. Obviously, you have a lot of experience with that as well.
I think that's a natural transition through an investor's career. A lot of folks we talk to started in a single family rentals,
yeah.
And then they graduated to a duplex or a quad, and then they bought a 10 unit, and then
they have a lot of tenants, and they're like, I want less tenants.
That's right.
And I still like cash flow though.
That's right. So then
what's the next step?
Then it comes to a 1031 exchange, and now they're buying a single tenant net lease property. That's a natural progression, I think, for a lot of folks. And I think that's where having a strong residential base and a commercial side, those two, I think, complement each other well.
Yeah, our goal is to help people be able to come into this business with little to no experience and help coach and guide them through that process over time. And it's super beneficial to know what the end game is. And you don't really know what the end game is if you've never been exposed to it, because you don't know what you don't know. You don't even know what's possible.
That's right.
Until you've been exposed to it. And then you can say, I like this, I don't like that. That's risky. That seems risky to me. This seems more comfortable. I know for myself, I love the idea of having a few really nice properties where the tenant pays for the taxes, where the tenant pays for the insurance, where the tenant pays for the repairs, versus having a big multifamily with a ton of headache, but at the same time, a lot of people like multifamily because they think it's very conservative and safe, and
everybody needs a roof over their head.
Exactly. So there's a lot of logic to that as well.
That's right.
What are your thoughts? Like, what do you think is kind of like the perfect portfolio for you? Because I know you can't speak for anyone else, but
that's right. I think it goes back to diversification and what is your why? What are your goals? We're not financial advisors by any means, but if you think about what is your stock portfolio like, it's got some small caps, which are a little bit more aggressive. It's got large cap blue chips, the GEs and those companies of the world. So those are your ones that are going to pay dividends over time. For me, I think it is, having been in it a little bit and tried a bunch of different things. Right now, for me, it's retail, but with a multi-tenant retail flavor. So I can get the benefits of diversification. If one tenant goes out, say a 2,500 square foot inline shop in a neighborhood strip center, kind of like an apartment building, there are folks looking to backfill that kind of space all the time. So I've got diversification, protection from vacancy, excessive vacancy. So for me, that's what I'm looking for now.
Yeah. We appreciate you sharing that. Well, any last words that you want to share before we wrap up, just, for anyone listening out there about getting into this business?
Sure. So I think getting into the business, it's about taking a deep breath a lot of times and taking a step back. We were just in a meeting where folks were talking about, how do you keep your positive attitude, right? Because real estate is up and down, not just in market cycles, but in the daily, if not the hourly.
This is great. This is terrible. Yeah, this is great.
Exactly.
It's great when you're making money, and it's terrible when you're not.
100%. And, going from somebody who's got a full-time job to somebody who's going to just commission, there's a roller coaster that you're on. But again, it's take a step back, look at the long-term vision, and try to stay as even-keeled as possible, right? because there's good days, there's bad days, but every day is an opportunity to learn. And I think that's the goal.
That's great wisdom. When you have a calm mind, you can make good decisions.
I think that's it.
Right. And when you're panicking and coming from a place of fear and scarcity, you're going to make bad short-term decisions, and bad short-term decisions lead to long-term bad places.
That's another interesting thing about commercial, right? Is that the decisions tend to be more numbers based as opposed to emotionally based. So the numbers say buy it because it meets your criteria, then buy it. Yeah. I was talking to someone.
It has pink carpet. Who cares?
Who cares? Because you can solve a lot of things with money.
Well, I just want to extend the offer out there for anyone that's, looking to scale up from the residential space to the commercial space. If you're an investor, if we can help you out, we want to be your strategic partner in that. If you're an agent and you are looking to get into the commercial space and you have any interest, Steve is heading up our commercial department as a mentor, and we are hoping to grow the brokerage with people that have the like-minded vision of creating wealth in real estate and want to serve their clients at a high level and really just bring value in the marketplace here, because there's a lot of opportunity out there, and we see things coming down the pike where there's going to be even more opportunity for investing over the next few years, and just really excited to have this opportunity. We feel like the timing's right, and just a lot of gratitude with all of this. So thank you very much.
Let's go.
All right.
Let's build it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Investor Agent Podcast today. We hope you found it valuable. Please tune in weekly at theinvestoragents.com.